Okay, so I want to talk about a video called Dear Daddy, which has had in about 10 days, it's had a couple of million views. It's from an organisation, a Norwegian organisation, and it is aimed at combating violence and sexual violence aimed at women. And in terms of its aim, I'm quite sure that it's all done with the best of intentions, and I applaud those intentions most definitely. But I left a comment on this video, and I had some responses, and that got me thinking about it, and I thought actually I'd quite like to discuss some of those points in a video. And so the problems that I have with this video is perhaps the initial problem, and if you haven't watched the video, I won't show you a clip of it. Just go and watch it. It's a 5-minute long video. It's a very provocative video in which what it portrays is it's as if it's a daughter talking to a father and saying, look, these are all the terrible things that men do to women, and that those things stem from letting the little things go, and effectively letting sort of sexually aggressive language go, and schoolboys saying nasty things to schoolgirls. This is a sort of message that it's giving. It details this as a specific example that schoolboys will call schoolgirls a slut or a bitch or a whore, and those are the seeds of what later down the line becomes rape, sexual assault and things like that. And that is the message of it. And it certainly portrays, I don't think anybody could watch that video and say that it doesn't portray men generally in a very positive light. Nearly every man, other than the dad figure, every man that's shown, it's either shown in a light that is a rapist or somebody who'd sexually assault or who would say terrible things towards women, or that there's an ambiguity, that even though they appear to be a nice guy, they're actually a nasty guy. So the school kids are saying nasty things, the taxi driver's raped her, even a husband, it talks about a husband, she's met this husband, he's a wonderful man, he's a really intelligent, nice guy, but then he beats her up, So even the good guys, even the guys like the husband she met, they're not really good guys. Beneath it all, there's something sinister going on. And I don't think that the video is saying that there's something universally rotten about men, but I think it's giving the idea that there's something generally rotten about men. It's really kind of negative portrayal. Now, I know a couple of comments that I got in relation to the comment that I left on there said, well, you shouldn't, so what? It's not saying all men are bad men. After all, the father figure's a good man, so it's showing that good men exist. But where else would we accept that logic, The logic we usually have is that we accept that sort of negative portrayals of things do really have an impact, right? And this is an area of men as abusive and aggressive and nasty is a very real sort of meme that goes around, isn't it? So it's not as if this is sort of fresh ground and nothing really to be concerned about. After all, I've just been doing a couple of videos talking about rape, so let's take the rape case, which is that, for example, if a woman makes a false rape accusation, a maliciously false rape accusation, and then the papers make a big thing about it, what does everybody say? I think on all sides of the argument, everybody agrees that does women a disservice, that women making false allegations does a disservice to women that make genuine accusations, and the papers making a big thing about it and making those false allegations seem more common than they actually are, again does women a disservice. So we accept that even though that isn't suggesting that all women make false allegations, in some ways it impacts on the way we view women, in that case, how seriously we take the accusations that they make and the statements we make, okay, and their honesty, that it somehow impacts. But it seems that we can kind of make that argument then, and everybody's happy with it. But as soon as it's something that involves men being portrayed in a bad light, it's just kind of waved away. Well, yeah, it's not saying every man's like that, so where's the impact? But it really did seem in this video that it was saying that the vast majority of men are all these bad men. There's all something a little bit sinister about them. And as I say, even the husband figure, who she dresses up as this I've met this marvellous guy, he's intelligent, he's got a great job, he's lovely to me, but then he starts beating her up, And the thing that really that hit me with this was regarding the school children, because this is what it was saying. It was all stemming from school children, and it portrayed what it portrayed was that aggressive Abusive language, hurtful, harmful language is something that schoolboys do to schoolgirls. Schoolboys are the perpetrators and schoolgirls are always the victims. Now, that certainly wasn't my experience at school, but I don't really want to go by my experience. What I want to talk about is what I've learnt off my wife, because my wife's been a teacher for about 20 years now. And this is a subject that we've discussed at length on numerous occasions. The trouble that you have at school with girls and the trouble that you have at school with boys, and the ways in which it's similar and the ways in which it's different, and the kinds of abuse and bullying that goes on. And one thing that is certain is the vast majority of abuse that goes on that girls experience at school, they've experienced as a result of other girls. If you're a girl and you've been called a slut at school, it's probably more likely than not from another girl. If you're a girl and you've been called fat at school, it's probably more likely than not from another girl. The same thing if you're a boy. Most of the abuse that boys suffer is from other boys. It's kind of like the evolutionary scenario. People who don't know a lot about evolutionary biology imagine that the main source of evolutionary pressure, the main source of competition, is different species competing with one another. But it isn't, actually. The main source of evolutionary pressure is within a species. It's foxes competing with foxes, badgers with badgers, hedgehogs with hedgehogs. It's not hedgehogs competing with foxes competing with badgers. And it's kind of the same thing here. The majority of that, which obviously stems from competition, I think it's boys with boys and it's girls with girls. And that's where most of the abuse comes from. Now, what I do know from my wife is that it's different. It takes on a different aspect. The sort of abuse that boys give each other and the sort of problems that it leads to tends to be perhaps, I don't want to sound sort of scathing of boys and men, but it's a little bit more basic, right? It's a little bit more rudimentary. And if there's a group of boys and two boys have a problem, it tends to remain between the two of them, and it's more likely to become violent. It's more likely to result in a fight than it is with girls. Girls groups seem to demonstrate more complicated behaviour, but in some ways it becomes nastier and harder to resolve from the perspective of a teacher or member of staff, because what will happen is that the majority of the group will end up ostracising an individual, because it's like the social dynamics are that much stronger, or that's something perhaps that women weaponise more than their fists. And what they'll end up doing, and imagine how bad that is, where it's your group of friends that is suddenly ostracising you and saying horrible things about you on social media and in the schoolyard, and passing little notes to you saying how much they hate you. And this is the kind of thing that happens more with girls and less with boys. Now, I'm not saying one is worse than the other. I mean, they're both pretty difficult. Violence is a thing that a school has to take very, very seriously. But when you have girls that are besides themselves, because these people who are their best friends are now saying the worst things in the world to them, that's a difficult thing for a school and for an individual to deal with. But the point is that the vast majority of the abuse that goes on, it's girls abusing girls verbally and it's boys abusing boys verbally. It's not boys abusing girls and it's not girls abusing boys. And yet this whole video is set up as if what happens at school is boys are the problem. They're the perpetrators of verbal abuse, and girls are always on the receiving end of it. And that just seems a massive misportrayal, and it makes boys come across as much worse than they actually are at school. Most of the time they're concerned, unless they're there's a girl they fancy, they're concerned with the activities of other boys, because that is their peer group, that is their social group. So I thought that was a really, really nasty misportrayal, and it made it look as if boys are the problem there, whereas actually all kids potentially are getting involved in this kind of nastiness. I think that's probably all I want to say. I did also get a couple of comments in that thread, people talking about rape culture and say, oh, well, of course, yeah, they might, girls might do this kind of thing, but you've got to take account of rape culture. We're living in a rape culture. And that isn't really something that I want to tackle here, but certainly that is something I've been minded for some time. I made a couple of blog articles, which I might link in the footnotes, about rape culture, and why I find it just the most ludicrous suggestion that our culture is rape cultured. So maybe I'll talk about that in another video. But the only bit that I want to say about it was just what I said in the comments there, which is that a lot of the evidence that's cited that our culture is rape cultured seems to me to be based on the very opposite of that. It's based on factors that exist not because we have normalized rape, but actually because because we regard rape as one of the most abhorrent crimes. And because we regard it as such an abhorrent crime, we are less inclined to accept that this person we know as a good person has raped someone, as we are to accept that he beat somebody up at the back of the pub car park, because after all, beating somebody up at the back of the pub car park doesn't carry with it half as much social stigma as raping somebody carries. So it's not the fact that we've normalised rape, it's the very opposite of that sort of has this disinclination that we have towards accepting that people would commit a crime like that. And it's the same with child abuse, I would suggest, as well. But that's a video for another day. That was what I wanted to say about this Dear Daddy video. The only thing I really disagreed with on the comment section was that some people saying, yeah, this video is only made to hate men. And I don't believe that I think it's made with all the right intentions, but it just portrays men in such a harsh light, and an unwarranted harsh light. That's how it came across to me anyway. Okay, well, have a look at that video if you haven't. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.